Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this week. I'm Liz Mangus, Literacy Specialist with Saddleback Educational Publishing. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. We've got Katie and Richard, Coffee with Katie and Richard, another episode, and this is a special episode because Katie and Richard are in the same place.
Are not the same person. We are not the same person.
We're actually in the same place at a school district in Ohio working together all this week. So we thought it would be kind of funny to see the sight gag. So yeah. So here we are.
So it's kind of like I'm not Janet Jackson or Michael Jackson. So we're not the same person. So we actually were in the same location.
I mean, this is how you can tell that maybe we've turned a corner where we can all kind of be in the same place now a little bit.
Yeah, which is very, very cool that, you know, we're here for a whole week in Dayton, Ohio, but we're working with Trotwood, Madison City Schools. We've been with them all week, and yeah, it's been a wonderful learning experience for people. Yeah, we're doing all kinds of cool stuff. So, and hey, Liz, before we get started, let's have, Katie put it in the thing there. Let's have people chime in. Where are y'all coming from?
Where are you coming from? When you go to the chat, go ahead and select everyone from the drop down before you answer so that we can, here, let me do that because I always forget to do that too.
Yeah, okay. I forgot to do that. So we just saw it amongst each other. Oh, okay. I can't do that for some reason.
Oh, you can't?
No,
well, that's not right.
Mine won't let me do it either.
Oh, well, we'll have to look into that. Well, okay.
It doesn't let me do everybody.
Okay. Well, I can let you know where people are logging in from. Well, you can see it though, right? So you can see it though.
Yep.
Okay, so as you are logging in, go ahead to the chat, select everyone from the drop down, and let us know where you're joining from. We also have the Q&A on the control board, the control panel. But with Katie and Richard, it's just easier to put everything in the chat, right? So we can do it that way. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. If you do put it in the Q&A, that's fine. We'll get to it too. I'll transfer it over. And if you do. If you'd like to take advantage of subtitles, you can do that by selecting live transcript and then click on show subtitles. So don't forget, we are on Twitter, all three of us. We love it when you follow us, give us a shout out, let everybody know that you joined us, give us your feedback on this session. We always appreciate hearing from you. Katie and Richard, I think you were back. It was back in May, the last time you were on. So it's been a little bit of time, but that's okay. We would like to see more of you though, because you're some of our favorites. What else has been going on? So you're in Ohio, you're working back out there with school districts. What else is going on?
Yeah, we're in Ohio and busy. You know, I'm on the road and kind of, Katie, you said this earlier. It's like, I'm praying for Labor Day weekend. Backed up, busy with school districts, coast to coast. But you know what? I had 18 months off, so I gotta just stop my whining.
Yeah, we both kind of, well, all the teachers were in their classrooms working like crazy. We kind of had the sabbatical that we didn't ask for. So I think I wrote 3 books during that time, and I don't know, Richard, I think we did like 50 webinars. So folks are responding because the chat's disabled.
Thank you. I see that.
Q&A area. Yeah. So I'll respond over there while folks are you know, because we're all educators. We just make things work. If one doesn't work, we just the other way.
Roll with it. Yeah. Okay. So we hear you that the chat is something's going on with the chat. It's disabled, so we can communicate through the Q&A. We'll just roll with it. We'll just do that. So thank you for your flexibility, everybody. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Can you believe the school year is already about to begin? It went by in a flash, right? So what is it that we need to do to ensure we're setting ourselves up and our students and our classrooms up for productive learning? So here to discuss this with us, Dr. Katie McKnight, Dr. Richard Cash. As you know, they're on very frequently, but I realize not all of you may know them. So very, very quick introduction. Katie McKnight, as you can tell, she's very dynamic presenter, dedicated teacher, and an award-winning author. You can find her at katherinemcknight.com and engaginglearners.com. She has tons of books, but these are the ones that I always like to show. literacy and learning centers for the big kids, great for our adolescent learners. There's plenty more where this came from, so definitely check her out. And we also have Dr. Richard Cash, who is an award-winning educator. He's worked in the field for, should I say it, 30 plus years?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
I
I could just say.
This
he's
is why Delta is charging me more, because of the bags under my eye.
So he's an expert, right? They're both experts. We have, you can find him at enrichconsulting.com. We'll put all that in the Q&A, so you can see where that is. And this is one of his latest books, Self-Regulation in the Classroom, Helping Students Learn How to Learn. As usual, we are thrilled to have you both, and I will let you take it from here.
Great,
Hey, just real
thanks,
quick,
Liz.
point of order. The chat is now working, so I'll see you guys over in chat.
Excellent. Thank you.
And Liz, I'm taking over the screen. Did you need the screen in?
No, you
Okay,
go for
there
it.
we go.
We're good.
All right. So as many of you may know, Katie and I like to kind of tag team on this. And so my field of expertise is really in gifted education, advanced learners, and definitely differentiation and self-regulation, whereas Katie is my empress. She's not even a queen. She is the empress of literacy. Let me tell you, I know enough about literacy to be dangerous. She saves me all the time from making mistakes when I talk about literacy. So we tag team this, so every other month we flip back and forth who's taking the lead. I'm taking the lead on this one, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about how do we set that right tone in our classrooms to begin our school year off with. Katie's going to be chiming in about the literacy component of it and the literature component of it, because as you're going to see as we go along here, that there are certain things that are going to be required to get our kids to feel like they fit within the classroom setting. So we have spent the last 2 years being like scared because of the pandemic. And one of the things that we do know about self-regulation and how we attend to the learning process is how we feel about a learning situation determines the focus of our attention. So if we don't feel good about where we're at, if we are nervous or anxious or scared, that's called a downshift. And so really what has happened is we get out of this prefrontal cortex, the learning part of our brain, and go into survival. And we move into that survival level where we're afraid. And so we're paying attention to very low level kinds of things. So we can't think critically, we can't think, we can't be creative and so forth. And so what we have to understand is that the way we set that classroom up, the way we interact with our kids from day one is going to be critically important to their success throughout the school year. The other thing is, as you're going to see later in this episode, is that how the classroom represents kids, represents who they are, is going to be critically important to getting them feeling good about where they're at. Now, I want to caution you on this idea of feeling good. This is not touchy-feely kind of stuff. It's really about, do I feel like I fit? Do I feel like I belong? Do I feel like people like me? Do I like what's happening in here? Those are things that we're really talking about that are extremely important to the learning process. So what you may start to see, and you probably saw this a lot last year as we were coming off of virtual learning, which again, Katie, I heard you say this today, and I thought this was really powerful. You said that if we knew virtual learning was effective, we would have done it 10, 15 years ago. And it's not. We know it doesn't work because we've tried it. We were forced to try it over those last couple of years. So do you want to speak more to that?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, things are just kind of wonky for me. I'm still having problems with chat. So, yeah, so just, really briefly, we've known for a long time, especially in my university days that, and universities talk about this too, that the online training and online teaching is very, very challenging. The highest failure rates are actually at those levels, or in those courses when we are teaching online. And the other thing too that I've noticed is that, if you think about Hattie's work, and we've talked about this too, of like surface teaching, deep and transfer. And post-pandemic, and a lot of it was just forced because of Zoom, is that we do a lot of surface level teaching rather than that deep and transfer. And of course, deep and transfer is where stickiness is in learning. Surface, like memorization of facts and things like that. There's certain times that, yes, you do surface learning. For instance, when you're learning multiplication tables or perhaps phonics, but getting conceptual and being able to transfer concepts, skills, content knowledge to different areas to expand your knowledge even more, that's where stickiness lies. And and it's because of the platform, we're kind of forced into that surface learning all the time, because deep and transfer requires more intimate human contact and interaction.
Absolutely. And so what I think you might be experiencing in your classroom as you see your students, especially this was happening last year, I want you to kind of pay attention to this when you see them at the beginning of the year, and use this kind of as a barometer for you, that when kids are dealing with stress, now stress is not a bad thing. Stress is actually a good thing because it makes us run faster, jump higher, and so forth. So the stress can have some really positive effects to it, but it also can have some very negative effects to it. So it can make us downshift. It can make us be afraid, right? And it can make us not listen. It can make us not pay attention to the more important things in life. So what you may be seeing is that kids are acting out. And it's kind of my sister, who was also a teacher, said that she had noticed that her ninth grade students, because she's high school family consumer science, she was finding her ninth grade students acting like fifth or sixth graders. And I told her, I said, well, Susie, that's because they are emotionally fifth or sixth graders. So they're acting out in a way that's not necessarily appropriate for their age level, because they've not been matured the way we would in a group setting. Impatience, impulsivity, those gaps in politeness and social skills, especially because we were on a virtual platform where we could turn the camera off, we could turn the mic off, we could turn the sound off, and just be there, but not be there, not be present. That limiting of range of behavioral responses to be able to appropriately respond to particular issues, that inappropriateness of emotional responses, of crying quickly over simple things, or acting out in ways that would just not be expected amongst that grade level of students. This one is a big one, that lack of empathy towards others. Kids that had been isolated because they might be isolated with their siblings, or they might be isolated by themselves, haven't learned how to get that sense of empathy there. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about, when we set up our classroom for this school year, these are the things we want to pay attention to. It's not about kids are born naughty. Kids are not born naughty. They learn naughty. And usually behavior is a symptom. It's not a source. So as we are thinking about our kids, these are not simple actions of a kid being naughty. They may be a response to, I don't know how to act. I am dealing with stress. I'm dealing with these issues outside the classroom. So one of the things I want you to pay attention to is the child is not just the academic side. We have to think about the wholeness of our children, that they come to us with social, emotional, and learning needs. So I want to share with you this idea of what is called self-regulated learning. Self-regulation for learning is a tri-dimensional idea of how we center ourselves towards the learning that's happening in classroom. There are three co-equal dependent sides to this. Neither one, any one of the three are not stronger or more important than the other. However, the lack of one or the under-preparedness in one can affect the other two. So let me share with you what I call the ABCs of self-regulated learning. The first dimension is what is called the affect dimension. And affect is our feelings, okay? Emotion, as in social and emotional learning, emotion really is a chemical reaction that happens within the midbrain, the amygdala. It emanates or triggers chemical reactions that happen throughout our brain and our body to then respond to stimuli. How we read it out, how we react to that response is what is called our feelings. The vast majority of our feelings are controllable. We can control them, and a vast majority of them are learned. They're learned through our experiences, they're learned through our culture, they're learned through our family and so forth. So we learn how to react to certain situations. So our feelings, like I said, with that very first slide, is that how we feel about a situation determines the focus of our attention. So we have to understand that some of our kids are coming in intimidated. Some are coming in shy. Some are coming in scared. Some are coming in with verbosity, right? I don't even know if that's a word, verbosity, but they're coming in verbose. You know, they think they're all puffed up. So we have to understand that we got to balance that. We got to make sure that kids feel good about where they're at. The next one is the B side. The B side is the behavioral side. Now, I said earlier, behavior is a symptom. It's not the source. So behavior is everything from how we work with others, how we collaborate, how we fit within the community, how we communicate with others, the literacy skills, the study habits, all that stuff is behavioral. We tend to spend a lot of our energies on the behavioral aspect of students, when we have to understand that's 1/3 of the dimension. There are two others that we need to pay attention to as well. When we isolate out behavior, we may change it for the moment, but we're not going to change the outcomes. So we have to think about, if a kid is acting out behaviorally, what is it that might be triggering it? Is it something that they don't feel like they fit? Or is it the way that they think about themselves, which is the cognition side or the C side of this particular diagram? Cognition includes 3 different levels. So the first level of cognition is what is called metacognition. And metacognition is very much that which we learned in teacher school, that thinking about our own thinking. The kind of the weird thing about that, thinking about our own thinking, is a little harder to understand as a child because that's an abstract concept of thinking about your own thinking. When I try to explain it to kids, what I'm really asking them to do is think about two things, not different. First, metacognition is that which you are reflecting on, that which you are thinking about in the moment. I'm thinking about, okay, when I'm finished here, I go to dinner, or when, I finish, then I have to pack up my suitcase. Those are all what are called metacognitive thoughts, right? It's also in metacognition is where your self-belief resides. How do you believe about yourself, or what do you believe about yourself? What are the messages that you send yourself? Do you think you are a good person? Do you think you are smart? Do you think you can do this? Okay, that's metacognition. That's the messages that we send ourselves. Then the second level is what is called infracognition. And I titled this is my term. Infracognition are the structures of thinking: creativity, critical reasoning, problem solving, decision making. It's all that thinking structure. Now, it is natural for us to think creatively, critically reason, problem solving, decision making. But in our brains, that naturalness is at a very low level. You know, the creativity of finding nuts and berries at the top of the hill, the critical reasoning, how am I going to avoid the saber-toothed tiger, and decision making and problem solving at a survival level, not necessarily at the high level of complexity that we have or that we need in this particular world. So that is infracognition. Now, the other piece of the other part of infracognition is what is called self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is, do we believe we've got the skills to do what it is that we need to do? Do we believe in that sense of having the tools to do what we have? Now, you cannot get to self-efficacy without a positive self-belief. So they build on each other. So if I don't believe in myself, I'm never going to become efficacious. So I need to make sure that in my classroom, my kids believe in themselves. They have those affirmations that they know that they can build themselves up to then be able to do what it is they need to do. The third dimension of cognition is what is called metaphysical cognition. And metaphysical cognition is the thinking beyond the self. So what we think beyond us. And that's that theoretical, hypothetical, philosophical level, theological kind of thinking that we have about ourselves. And this is really taking that information, and as Katie already said, moving into transformative ways of thinking. So going from very surface kind of thinking to that very advanced levels of thinking. Now, all kids can get there. They can get there through the ways that we question them. The essential questions that we develop in classrooms really move us toward metaphysical cognition. Now, here's a critical factor about the ABCs, get it? Affect, behavior, cognition. That the critical factor about the ABCs of learning is that they are codependent upon each other. They work together. You cannot focus in on one without making sure you focus in on the other two. So they are very codependent upon each other. So I'm always telling kids that they should reflect on their ABCs. How you feeling? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Let me say that one more time. How you feeling? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Those are the three reflective activities we do to encourage kids to develop that self-regulation. Katie, I see you're back on.
Yeah, I'm back on. That's always our cue for each other. Like, I need to say something.
Right.
So a lot of folks are saying in the chat area, we got chat moving, and that, they're noticing this. And a couple of teachers who teach at the high school level have remarked on it, that the students are coming in, and even high school students, are lacking routines, expectations. And I think it's just a great reminder that, you can't assume just because they're bigger bodies, middle school and high school students, that they've got those routines done. And even though they have routines, they still don't know what the routine is with your class, with your subject area, and what the expectations are. And so I think it's really important to remind all of us of that even the older kids need that. And then Richard's discussion of all of this is in his book, Self-Regulation for the Classroom. And Liz and I posted the link in the chat area. And then also we wrote an article during the pandemic, one of our many pandemic projects, for the teaching channel on this. And I also posted that link in there as well. But sure. Richard and I have written about this too, as far as how this is situated within literacy skill development. And anybody who has taught reading intervention knows this, or kids who are struggling readers, that so much of getting them to get back into text and developing the willingness to do it is that affective piece of it, and of motivation and engagement. And then of course, the strategies, the study habits, the literacy skills is behavioral. And then of course, the metacognition, infracognition, that is higher level. So as you think about it, it goes right up those levels of comprehension from simple recall, which is more behavioral kinds of things, going into analysis, and then that much higher level of comprehension where we're getting into representational, being able to draw differences, similarities between multiple texts. That gets into that cognitive level as well. So this is really important for literacy development, particularly in reading.
Yeah, and I pre-pandemic, or what I call BC, before COVID, I used to say that when kids cross the parking lot from elementary school to middle school, and then again from middle school to high school, aliens come down and suck out all of their common sense, so they don't know how to function in a classroom. Now, aliens had 18 months to 24 months to come down and suck out all that common sense. So realize that your kids, no matter how old they are, lack the structures, lack the expectations of what they should be doing, how they should feel, how they should behave, what they should be doing. Yeah.
Yep. And then Brandy wrote in the chat area too, for us to remember too, is that she said, I just wanted to comment that as a high school teacher, I've noticed a large developmental gap in those students who will be in 11th grade this year. They made the middle school to high school transition the first year of COVID. So hopefully as they go into 11th grade, this is quote unquote their first normal year since COVID hit. And that's a huge factor.
Yep. Now, one of the things that I don't want us to forget BC. I also don't want us to forget AC, okay? To understand where kids are at, and we need to move forward. We need to move forward. We cannot keep blaming COVID or the internet for whatever is happening. That means we have our charge in front of us, and this is our charge. Now, how we develop self-regulation is not natural. It is a learned process. So there's actually 4 stages to this. Now, again, like we've been saying, even 11th graders are going to be at the very first stage of self-regulation because they've not had those experiences. So first and foremost, we as the adults in the setting need to model the expectations. We need to have kids observing us being overt about how we feel. What are we doing? What are we thinking? We need to overtly model those things. Now, I know some secondary teachers are a little uncomfortable with it because primary teachers do that all the time. And yes, we're going to have to do that in the secondary levels as well, because kids need to hear you saying it, see you doing it. The modeling is so critically important at this point. So what I would do, I'm standing in front of my kids day one and say, boys and girls, I am very excited that you are here with me today and you're going to be with me this school year. I'm very excited and I'm a little anxious. I'm a little nervous because I want to make sure the year goes right. And so I want to start off on a good foot with you. I want you to feel good because I want to feel good about you feeling good. Here's what I'm going to do to make sure I lower my anxiety, keep myself positive emotionally so that I can do the best that I can do. I'm going to take deep breaths. I'm going to pause every now and then. I'm going to keep those good visual memories going on in my head and so forth. Here's what I think I want to do. This is my plan. My goal is for you to all be successful. And I am going to work very hard throughout this year. My goal, my thought process is to get you to be successful. Overt. I cannot be more, I can't state that enough. Be overt. Second phase is then the copy and do, the second stage, copy and do. So kids gotta see you do it, therefore they're gonna copy it. And I would make them go through the ABCs, say it after me. A, B, C, affect, behavior, cognition. have them copy it. You might think, well, these are older kids. No, they need to copy it. That's how we learn. Some cases, kids won't spend as much time in the copy and do. They can transcend relatively quickly to practice and refinement. And practice and refinement is where now they're on their own. They get to practice it. They get to do it. You set the stage for them, but they get to do it. And then the final stage is where it's independence and application. Now we can kind of let go of that. And I hope you recognize the subheadings of each of those stages. Some of you may be out there virtually nodding. You recognize that as what is called the GRR, or the gradual release of responsibility. Popularized by Fisher and Frey in the late 80s, early 90s, really comes out of the work of Vygotsky, which comes out of the work of self-regulation. So you can see that this process is a psychological process that happens with our students. So this is not unrelated to what we're doing in the classroom. So in this handout, you will see in the handout there, I've got multiple things that you can kind of look at your own leisure to ideas that you may want to be doing. So I've cross-related the ABCs, affect, behavior, and cognition, to the 4 stages of the development of self-regulation. And Katie, I want to see if there are any big questions that may be floating around out there before I move on to the next piece here.
Not any huge questions right now. We can give folks a moment to put those in there, but just, affirmations as far as what you're saying, being very explicit and concrete.
Yes.
I want to add too that, we think of that all the time for the little guys, for the littles, about being explicit and concrete. But with adolescent brain development, they kind of lose a bit of their ability to make inferences as far as emotional responses. And that's a whole other webinar actually on the adolescent brain, and they lose that. So even more reason why we have to be concrete. And so like the Dr. Phil kinds of messages, like I feel and I think are really actually important. So being concrete, not just for the littles, also for the older students.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Let us, now, like I said, there are going to be some slides that I'm not going to spend very much time on because they're, kind of like this is a list of ideas that you can use as you are heading towards the beginning of the school year, as you're heading to get ready for the classroom. That overtness you'll see in the modeling stage, in the copy and do stage, that you're really encouraging. You're the encourager now that's helping kids work through those situations, to discuss them, to talk about them, and giving them help with planning and organizing and dealing with those difficult situations. The practice and refinement that you're really paying attention to. Just because the first week of school is over really doesn't mean self-regulation is done. No, it happens all the time. This is my the conflict that I have with SEL programs versus SRL. SEL programs tend to be those things that we do on Tuesdays at 10:30. Well, self-regulation, or that social and emotional balance, happens all the time. So it's not something that we can plan for at Tuesday at 10:30. It happens all the time. So self-regulation is something we need to pay attention to all the time. In fact, one of my lesson designs is where I actually have you embed self-regulation into the lesson. Where are you encouraging the affect? Where are you encouraging the behavior? Where are you encouraging the thinking process? That is really critical every single day. It's not just something that happens one day a week or one day a month, that it's something that happens all the time. Even when they get to independence and application, that they are still being reminded of that you're still kind of helping them get back to it, because this is a cyclical kind of process that they go through, because they're going to, especially as kids transition post-secondary, They're going to go back to stage one. They're going to go back to needing, modeling, and observing. They're going to go back. So we got to constantly help them move through that cycle of going from stage one to stage four and back to stage one again. So this then leads me to that big overarching idea of then how do we create that learning environment for our kids that first and foremost makes them feel like they want to be there. And that is through what is called a safe and emotionally secure environment, and then that community orientation. I have three critical factors for that. Three critical factors. Now, this comes out of the work of both Eric Jensen and Robin Jackson. So I do want to cite them as being my mentors for how I did this. And I call it RIC. It's a very easy way to remember this. RIC, R standing for reliable relationships. It comes out of Robin Jackson's work with high poverty schools. High poverty schools tend to have a huge amount of teacher turnover. So the teacher that they had one year may not even be there at the next year, or may not even be there at the change of the quarter. So it's that reliableness. Now, in a school where you might have a secondary school, especially, you have 150 kids. And you have 150 kids and they have 6 different teachers all day long. And they need to know who is one person, whether it be the counselor or custodian or one of the cafeteria workers or the principal or AP or the choir teacher or the band teacher or the social studies teacher. That is that person they feel like they can talk to. Same in elementary. Who is that person they can talk to? Who is that person that they can count on to be their support? Many kids that come out of levels of poverty do not have that at home. And so we have to provide that for them. We cannot ignore that they need that person that is reliable. Next, individual importance. Every kid has a talent worth developing. Even, I've been in the field of gifted education for 34 years, and I will tell you that every kid has a talent worth developing. Not every kid is gifted, but every kid has a talent worth developing. Our job is to uncover that individual importance, because that's what makes me feel good, is that you recognize that I am different. I am an individual, and this is what makes me different. And the third one is the C is community connections. We all want to be a part of the group. Now, there are some introverts out there, and there are some kids that would prefer to be kind of on their own. They don't want a huge group of friends, but they want to feel like they're a part of something. So how do we, even in a secondary, we only have them for 45 minutes, 45 to 50 minutes, and then a new group comes in and you have them maybe on a block schedule, and so you only see them 3 times a week or whatever, but you still build that community in your classroom that day one. And my recommendation to you is the first week you spend no time on content. I know there's a bunch of you out there gasping for breath. Oh my God, I have no time. I have no time. And now you're going to tell me that I have to do this. I have to not spend 4 or 5 days on content. I've just taken 5 days out of my instruction. Yes, because if you don't do this first, within those first 4 days or 5 days, build that classroom community, build the expectations, build in that sense of everybody fits as an individual, and we all work collectively towards each other. If you don't do that, you're going to teach, they ain't going to learn. Right, Katie McKnight?
Yeah, so let me just share this. So very, very quickly, you should see like the chat, everybody's like, yeah. Like there's lots of hearts and emojis with everybody blowing hearts and everything. And I love this, Jennifer. The first week should always be you're building your home for the year. And
Mhm.
actually, one of my former students, when I taught at the university, is online today. Seth is online, which always touches my heart. But most of you know that, I taught at the university level for 16 years. And one of the things that I used to ask my MAT students, I don't know if Seth remembers this too, but I would always ask them on the first day of class, or actually the first night of class, I'd say, I want you to think about that teacher that made the difference in your life, the one that you want to be like. And always they will say, I loved, Dr. Cash, because he did this for me. He really connected with me. He cared about me. And it was there that I fell in love with physics, or I really enjoyed this. And it's always, they never say, oh, because they really knew their content, or they gave me 50 multiple choice quizzes that year. It's always the emotional. And so research on teachers and teacher induction, that also comes up as well too, is that it's always that relationship building that comes first. And of course, John Dewey has written about that quite extensively. There's many that have, which is the answer to every teacher certification exam, is John Dewey. But so this is really, teaching is a sacred art form and craft, and that relationship between teacher and student is magical.
I kind of quickly, while Katie was talking, tried, because I hear her talk all the time. So I was paying attention to the chats in there.
I really am like his wife.
Yes.
This is work.
Yes. So I'm reading some of the chats in there, and Robert Kim, I think, send an introductory email. I would say yes, and send an introductory video, because now we've done this. We can do this. You can send a quick little video that, not even 30 seconds, just say, hey, I'm going to be your teacher this year. I can't wait till you get to my classroom. Here's a little bit about me. Here's a picture of my dog. Here's a picture of my goldfish. Here's a picture of my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my husband, my wife, whatever. Just to let your kids know you are human, and even be goofy, even be funny, make a mistake, let them see you make the mistake. Because the reality is, our kids need to know we're just as human as they are. So again, keep Rick in mind. All right, so let's move forward here. Whoa, I've been getting some kind of crazy wonky things going on with my computer today. So there we go. So what I've done is I've looked at good old Maslow's and try to cross-relate that to the concepts and theories of self-regulation. And so there are 5 dimensions to this, but I'm going to put it into 4 because the physiological aspect of food, shelter, air, and water, when they're in a school setting, they have food, shelter, air, and water. That's where they are. Now, yes, some kids may not have enough food outside of the classroom or outside of the school, but we're going to assume food, shelter, air, and water, that fundamental physiological stuff is being taken care of. We're really going to be looking at safety, because remember, as Maslow stated, is that if you don't have the physiological stuff, you can't move to that second level. If you don't have the second level, you can't move to the next level. If you don't have the next level, you can't move to esteem. And ultimately, you can't move to what is called self-actualization. Now, I know there's a lot of debate out there that nobody actually gets to self-actualization. I want you to all forget that and just say, okay, the idea here is we're going to take these from safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization and cross-relate them to the 4 stages of self-regulation and how that looks in my classroom. So this slide right here is all about the modeling and observing. This is developing that sense of safety in the classroom. Now, I am not going to get into the myriad of issues that we now have about really bodily and physical safety in the classroom, because kids are very tuned to what's going on in the world. It's more about safety of the intellectual risk-taking, the safety of no one's going to bully me, no one's going to criticize me. We're all here to help each other. We're a community of learners. So really it's about making that environment predictable, that my teacher is going to have a set timeline, that there are ways that I'm going to proceed within this classroom. This is one of my problems when I go into schools and I see that revolving schedule. Okay, Monday I have first period is math. Tuesday, it's now second period. Wednesday, it's third period. Thursday, it's fourth period. Friday, it's fifth period. Monday, it's sixth period. Then it starts all over again. And then it might be A and B schedule. And I don't know where I'm at. And, I get it. I get it. You want to rotate that schedule because you all don't want to have the same first period. I get that, right? However, that may not necessarily solve the problem of first period, they're half asleep. Sixth period, they're ready to go, right? But it's how we set up that predictableness of the environment, feeling secure, the consistency of mood management. This is more for the teacher than it is necessarily for the student. I worked with a teacher many, many years ago who I didn't know from day to day whether I was going to see Miss Swanson or Miss Swamp Monster. Okay, because I really think this person was bipolar and didn't really know how to manage her own affect. And so kids didn't know that either. So her class was always very uproarious. And this was when I taught middle school, which means that her first period would come to me for social studies and it would be a nightmare. So the reliableness, that consistency is really, really important. The other thing is about that learning environment, that being very aware of how you set up your classroom. And I will tell you, no rows and columns. Get your kids out of that structured rows and columns in your classroom. Oh, but as a high school teacher, I'm getting them ready for college. BS. No, that's not true. And Katie, come on in. I know you want to say something about this. Rows and columns don't exist anymore. Colleges and universities that do those 350 kids in a lecture center do not get good outcomes. You are going to see more and more of those bigger, those classes where kids are actually working in project form. Go ahead.
Yeah, really just rows are a tool of the devil. Not that I feel strongly. If you also think about it too, is that, you know, when students go to college and they're in high school and we're getting them ready for quote unquote, the real world. Can you think of the last meeting that you had at work, or, you know, maybe your spouse or significant other, you know, who doesn't work in education, were they sitting in rows? And maybe if they were in the military, perhaps, but even there, you know, like people that I know who are vets and you know who are in the military, you really don't do it anymore because it's just not conducive to dialogue, discussion, and such. And actually, universities are really starting to get away from those large lecture hall classes. Those are becoming more and more an archaic form of instruction at colleges and universities. And just very quickly, you know, having been, you know, worked at, you know, taught at a university for 15 years, and I was in administration at one point, you know, it was pragmatic. It was a very cost-effective model, but they saw that there were huge attrition rates in those big lecture hall classes. So universities have gone away from that, especially during the pandemic, and have created now freshman experiences where it's smaller groups and clusters where you go through a series of courses together, like your intro to comp and some of the other kind of required courses, and they cluster those students together. So it's an intimate kind of cohort. So that's really changed because they recognize, you know, and they've known it for a long time that it's not effective instructionally, but they did it primarily for financial reasons.
Yeah. So the other thing you'll notice here, one of the very last piece there on the lower left or lower right column there, it says, teachers encourage kids to smile by smiling. I remember during my teacher training days, the professor said, and don't smile till Christmas. Wrong.
Okay, I'm going to say
Smile.
that right now too. That professor was just wrong.
Absolutely wrong. Smile all the time. Kids need to know you want them there. I know that I talk too much, so read through these slides. So this, what you saw here, might be the way you structure first quarter. This might be your focus in second quarter. How do we make sure kids feel like they belong in that environment? This might be fostering individual strengths and interests, might be third quarter. And then the final one being creating that sense of autonomy might be fourth quarter. Now, you might also want to say, well, you know what? I kind of like all four of them. Great, pick and choose, but be very purposeful on how you set up your classroom so that kids can start developing that sense of autonomy. All right, so take your time, go through that and see what you can see on that. So now I'm going to introduce my lovely road wife. She's going to be talking to you about students seeing themselves in the curriculum, in the classroom. This is extremely important. If we are using curricular materials that are very Western European centric, kids are not going to see themselves, and they need to see themselves within the content area. So Katie, you're on.
Yeah, so let's flip it to that next slide. So here's how we can do this. And it's not just, also looking at making sure that kids are represented from, all different backgrounds and that they can see themselves, but it also has to do with how we can get kids engaged and motivated into text. Because I always hear this from colleagues too, is they say, okay, Katie, yeah, I get it, but they're not motivated. They're not engaged to read. So this is also the answer to that. This is how you just get kids to read more. It starts with a great essential question that really gives purpose for reading. And when students don't have a real purpose for reading, well, why would you be motivated to read it? So I want you to think about something that you had read recently. I just finished Crimson Rose by Angie Thomas. She wrote a couple of other YA books. And let me begin with the fact that I didn't read it because somebody posed a question for me to find the main idea of that novel and evidence to support that main idea, or I had to identify the author's purpose, or I had to take a multiple choice quiz when I finished the novel to prove that I read it. That's not why I read it. That's not motivating. It's not a way to draw me in. Now, those kinds of skills-based text-dependent questions are important. So Katie is not saying that you don't ask them, but the starting point is not find the author's idea. The starting point is a great question. And Brandy, that's exactly what I say all the time. Yeah, Brandy, when we were talking in Omaha last week, it's about great questions. It's got to answer the question of so what. So this is how Katie thinks of essential questions. And it creates that purpose for the reader. So they're open-ended kinds of questions. They're thought-provoking. They're not easily answered. They kind of make you a little bit uncomfortable. And they require higher order thinking. So when you think of Bloom's, it goes right up that trajectory. If you think about Richard's ABC model, it gets into that infracognition, metacognition, and it points to those big transferable ideas that are conceptually based. So if I said something like, what are the limits of friendship? Friendship is the concept. What middle school student is not going to have an opinion about what friendship means? And then raises additional questions. So as we're struggling with that essential question, it's going to raise more questions. It requires justification, and then it recurs over time. So go ahead, Richard, go to the next slide there for me. He's being Vanna White there and turning the letters for me. Yeah. So again, as I said, we want to develop that series of questions that support their exploration. Those are the text-based questions, but we always start with that big question, that big essential question. And we want to encourage students to explore the big question in more than one text. So go to the next slide, Richard. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. So I have a topic of personal courage. I'm going to use nonfiction informational text. Here's my essential question. What can we learn from the courage of others? Or if we had like tales of past fiction, how can the stories of your ancestors shape our identity? And if we look at that first one, how can we learn from the courage of others? What's the concept that I'm getting at here? You can just type it into the chat area. Hey, Richard, for 10 points, what's the concept? He's got to turn on his mic.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, oh, I already went to the bar. Say that again.
Yeah.
Oh, and Kathy Perez just asked in the question box, where's the handout? Oh, by the way, Liz put that in the chat box, the connection to the handout. So we're looking at your EQ of how.
Yeah, so what's the concept, or what can we learn from the courage of others? The concept would be?
Well, I'm going to say it depends. There's the attorney.
Yeah.
It can be courage. It can be stories. It could be ancestors. It depends on what your focus is. But you're really talking here about informational text. I don't know. It depends. Personal courage.
Well, the first one,
it's courage. I would say
you win. That's my intent, and I'm going to show you what that looks like as far as selecting text. And then the second one is really identity. That's what I'm getting at there. But courage is something I can put into other places. We can explore that in an ELA class. I can explore that when we look at like famous scientists, for example. We can explore that within a social studies curriculum. And then identity is all over the place too. We can look at that in that's a very personal kind of question too. So so identity, again, in an ELA class, social studies, I can look at it in health class. There's a lot of places where that would fit. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Richard.
I want to jump in really, really quickly here. Andrea said self-perception. I want you to be careful when you are creating essential questions that you don't bog down too many concepts and misidentify things. Katie's talking about personal courage. The concept is courage. Tales of the past. It's identity. You're not putting in too many different concepts in there. So, okay, go ahead.
Next. Okay, so here's an example of an essential question. And this was right before the pandemic. Richard and I were working in a school district in Northern Virginia, also known as Alexandria City Schools. And I was in a 7th grade class, and we were developing a lesson. They had to, what standard are you meeting? And the standard was cause and effect. So we took an essential question: how can an unexpected event create long-lasting consequences? This is the skill written in the Standards of Learning in Virginia. Cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. Okay, next part, Richard. And so what we did is we took multiple texts, okay? So the first one is I took Mount St. Helens. I modeled through a read aloud. So here we go, model and observe, right, Richard? Ding, 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 ding. That's my I do part. I'm going to show students I'm going to identify what the cause was, what the effects were. All right. And I'm going to discuss that with them. I'm also modeling for my kids how I make inferences, how I draw ideas from the text, how I use my background knowledge to understand the text. Then after that, we did a graphic organizer, and then I asked the questions. This was like a little push for them. I said, what do you think of these effects? Because like classic kind of 7th grade, you have the cause and then the effects, and they're just kind of listed as a little grocery list. And I said, I want you to rank order these. Which ones do you think had a greater impact or a lesser impact? And they rank ordered them. Then one of the students said, Dr. McKnight, part of the reason why they're not all created equal is because they kind of fit in different areas. And I said, how so? And he says, some of them have human impact some of them are environmental, some of them are political, and they started identifying them. Whoa, they're going way up on the analysis, right? And they realized that an effect is not an effect, is not an effect, is not an effect. They started making little turkey trails too, to understand that one effect was a catalyst for another effect. And as they were discussing it, they really got into it. It just, the whole lesson advanced in a way that it didn't. And when I was debriefing with the teacher afterwards, she said, the reason why that happened was because of the question. Like, she totally got it at that point, because our initial conversations were, you know, what are we teaching? Like, what's the question? And it was always like a text-based question, like, well, what is the major cause that's represented and the effects that are listed in the article? So it's very baseline recall as opposed to answering that question. The kids had to do that in order to answer the question. So that's my whole point, because if you keep asking those lower level questions, that's where they're going to hang out. Ask the hard question first, the big juicy question first, because they'll figure out what they need to know to answer that question. Then the kids were in separate groups, because this gets into the standard where they have to use multiple texts. So then the kids had a choice. All right, I'm ready for the next, you know, to click that, Richard. And ironically, let me tell you when this happened, February of 2020. So the kids had a choice between one article about 9/11, another one about the 2004 tsunami that happened in Indonesia. And then it wasn't COVID-19 pandemic, but it was this mysterious virus that was circulating in Asia that started in Wuhan. And it was interesting because that was not the favorite article. A lot of the kids picked the 2004 tsunami. They were very interested in that. That's what the majority of kids picked. And from there, they did exactly what I did. They had a graphic organizer, they analyzed, but we ratcheted up. And after the kids found the effects, they had to rank order them, what they thought was the most important. And then they also had to identify them. Was it environmental? Was it political? Was it societal? Was it a human cost? And then one group had economic, and they added that, guess what, for 9/11. That was put in for 9/11. Okay, I'm ready for the next one, Richard. So here's again what it's going to look like, okay?
Katie, just want to say we're almost out of time.
Yeah, I know. So just go ahead and plop that up there, Richard. Just put the whole slide up there. But this is what it can look like too. So you can see that there's a wide variety of texts that we have. Some of them are also Saddleback publications. I just want to give a shout out for them. And we have a wide variety representing different backgrounds, different cultures, different times, different places. Go ahead and show the next one. And then here's another one, World Transformations. Again, those graphic books actually Saddleback has, which I love. So you can see there's two books for Jackie Robinson. One is more of an informational text that's a higher level. And then we have a graphic novel version too. Graphic novels are really good, by the way. That graphic biography series is awesome that they have. So that's kind of a shameless plug for Saddleback. And then go to the next slide, Richard. I think that those are the two that I shared. If you want differentiated book lists, I have gobs of them, gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs. Kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, go and get them. That's where they are. Have fun with them. You'll notice that they have a text complexity band, not Lexile. That's a whole other webinar to explain why that is. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Katie. I talked too long and I made you rush.
No, you're good. It's all good.
But,
I'll get you next time when I lead. You won't have time to talk.
Right. You know, and again, I just want to get back to, even through those essential questions, we're having kids find themselves in the content. We're having them reflect on their life experiences within the content, because that is how we connect kids to the content. So I know we've gone over. I really want to thank you all. Liz, come back on, because I know you've got some final thoughts and final things to say.
Yes,
Let me say this let me say this for Nicole. Nicole has an important question. She said, did you read the entire article out loud? The answer is no. I read about 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs of it, and then the kids took over. Yeah.
And what I said was, read enough so the kids get the sense of your fluency and then
Yes.
guide them through the rest of it.
Yes.
I learned from Katie McKnight.
Robert also was asking if the essential question, Robert teaches adult learners. So the essential question piece, could that work as a homework assignment in reaction to an assigned reading, or is it really something that should be guided in discussion in class?
I would suggest, because essential questions are questions that are not answerable. They cannot be answered through 1 or 2 lessons. They are very difficult. So it might be something that you use as a home study aspect of contemplate. Definitely take this question home with you and contemplate it, but take the time to really think it through. It is not something that there's an expectation, there's an immediate answer to it. So I'm always very cautious about having that as a homework. Make it a home study, go home and think about it. Okay.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's share so we know who is coming up next week. Next week. We have Andrea Bittner next week. I encourage you all to join us for this. It will be a shorter webinar, but Andrea is a teacher, and she recently put out a book. It's a very compelling story of how this book came to be. And really the overarching message is about making connections with your students and their families. I don't want to spoil it, so I will let you know. It will be the webinar will be on the shorter side, but I encourage everybody to join us, because if you just need to be inspired and hear a great, compelling story, this is I enjoy her so much, and I hope you all will be able to join us live for this one. So this will be next week at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Also, don't forget our new Go Decode phonics-based library. This is for tweens, so students in grades 4 through 8 who need support with phonics. These are books that are specifically created for students in that age range, so they don't have that like baby kindergarten feel. So this is a great resource. If you are in need of this, you can email me, reach out to Saddleback. We can send you samples, answer any questions that you may have. I think we got most of the questions. Just checking one more time in the chat. Nicole says you need them, the phonics. Well, I will reach out to you and we will get you some samples. Nicole, all right, I got your name. And then Katie, I wanted to say, I wrote this down, webinar on the adolescent brain.
Yeah, we can do that, and how that impacts literacy development. Absolutely. Yeah. So the stuff on neuroscience with adolescents is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Your brain changes as much at the onset of puberty as 0 to 12 months. That's the teaser.
Yeah.
We need that webinar, so we will be connecting to get that for everybody. Maybe the next Coffee with Katie and Richard, but we'll definitely get going on that. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you to Katie and Richard. We always love these sessions. Tiara, I'll write your name down too. Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you everybody for logging in and the great interaction today. It was amazing. And then Katie and Richard, next time, now you've set the standard. You've got to be in the same location for every webinar.
Yeah, we're actually in the same place. If you were on at the beginning, I was standing next to Richard, but now we're in separate rooms where we're working in Ohio.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if we can make that happen. If not, that's okay. We want you back anytime.
I always tell people that Katie and I are like an old married couple. We may be in the same place, but we sleep in 2 different bedrooms.
Yeah, we don't sleep in the same place. That's you can edit that.
All right, everyone.
Okay.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.